Sir, we are live, sir. Please start.
Okay. Good evening to all, and I'm extremely happy to address my audience on a very important topic: inclusive, resilient, and sustainable transport. This is where we also stand as a university, India's first university, National Rail and Transportation Institute, Vadodara. I am Professor Thakkar, associated as a faculty with NRTI Vadodara. Broadly, I operate in the domain of transportation management, logistics, and supply chain management. Before joining NRTI, I contributed at IIT Kharagpur for 10 years, and I have published papers in Transportation Research Party, International Journal of Production Research, addressing various issues in supply chain management and transportation area. I would just like to begin with a small offerings of the institute, and subsequently we will go into the topic. So NRTI is a vision of Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and it is India's first university in the transportation domain. University offers undergraduate programs in various 5 areas: BBA, BSc in transportation, B.Tech, and then MBA in supply chain, MBA in transportation, and various MSc programs. So this university is funded by Ministry of Railway, and I am extremely happy to share that Indian Railway has done remarkable work during COVID-19. And when we are talking about inclusive, resilient, and sustainable transport, I would consider Indian Railway as one of the exemplary logistics service provider. It has supported mankind through special operations of Shramik special trains. It is an example of flexibility, adaptability. They have run even the COVID-19 isolation coaches, and they have also run in freight the longest train called Sheshnag, and supported the supply chain of various industries. So today's talk will broadly focus on introduction to transportation, model share comparison in different cities, inclusive transport, resilient transport, sustainable transport, comprehensive mobility plan launched by Government of India, National Urban Transport Policy, and Government of India policy measures time to time on sustainability. And I would also like to emphasize towards the end of my session how academics and industry can contribute in IRS, which I call inclusive, resilient, and sustainable transport. So transport is quite a fascinating domain, and when it comes to exploring the various modes of transport, integrating various modes of transport, Government of India is putting a lot of emphasis on Gati Shakti mission, where multimodal transportation is the key objective. How we can synergize the various modes of transport so that we can improve upon our cost efficiency, and simultaneously we can also address our global concern for negative impact on environment. So transportation, if you see the link, then it is linked with all the facets of society and nation. It not only moves the goods, people, but it also links the culture, societies, unifies villages, reduces the distance, and bring the closeness. And in summary, it coordinates movement of people, goods, and vehicles. So there are various facets which enriches the domain of transportation, like safety, health, freight, work, emergency, energy, land, labor, and so on. If you see the impact of transportation, then at one side it improves the quality of life. On the other side, it is the biggest enabler and booster of economic growth. So transportation contributes to 6.3% of Indian GDP, and it is 7.8% in US GDP. On the flip side, we cannot ignore that transportation accounted for about 64% of global oil consumption in 2020 and responsible for 24% of direct carbon dioxide emission because of fuel consumption. This sector accounted for 57% of global oil demand and 28% of total energy consumption in 2020. Coming to our today's talk and the pillars, IRS, inclusive, resilience, and sustainable. One way is to address them separately, look at them disjointedly, and work in each dimension to improve the efficiency of transport and hence its impact on industry and people. When I look at the inclusive transport, it is more about transport for all, safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport, not only for the normal people, but also it should provide good mobility to physically, socially, economically backward people of society. Resilient transport is all about capability of the transport system to bounce back in case of any disruption. Disruption can be of any kind. It may be natural disaster, maybe war, and under these circumstances, how my transport system can bounce back and restore its services. Sustainable transport, where we all are concerned, and that is about how my transport can have low impact on the environment. So this is a disjointed view, and fine, I can put my effort in each direction, but if we go by a holistic perspective, connect all these three, then we can see that we can achieve better synergy across all three domains, and one domain is actually enriching and strengthening the other domain. So this is something where we can see the holistic transport, where my sustainable transport, inclusive transport, and resilient transport, they integrate with each other. If I look at the intersection of sustainable transport and resilient transport, it is more about transport for economic environmental development. If I look at the intersection of inclusive and resilient transport, it addresses socio-economic development of the nation. And if I look at the intersection of sustainability and inclusive transport, when some of the areas are in fact overlapping, it would more be socio-environmental development. So what we are trying to achieve through various policy measures, through various missions like Gati Shakti mission, and unifying even the ministries at the strategic level, we are trying to achieve a holistic transport for the nation. Doing this, what we are trying to achieve? I think we are more in line with SDGs, which are Sustainable Development Goals declared by WHO. So there are 17 sustainable goals, and these goals are directly linked with holistic transportation, integration of IRS, and doing IRS transportation is more about achieving the sustainable goals. We have contributed some research in this area of IRS, For example, strategic location of ambulances under temporal variation, demand and travel time. So transport is supporting the life of the people, and in what way we can have a responsive transport for emergency services. Similar way, another study we conducted on impact of risk in food grade transportation, and there we tried to analyze that how can we reduce the wastages in agriculture produce. So almost 40% is getting wasted in supply chain, and transportation is one of the area which demands special attention. So we tried to develop a robust transportation system by which allocation, scheduling and routing can be done effectively. Robust optimization of sustainable food grain transport is the another extension that we explored to meet uncertain supply and intentional disruptions. And the last one, that is environmentally conscious logistic planning, considering various wastages for food grain industry, and we used hybrid swarm optimization approach for developing a sustainable and resilient transportation mechanism. If you look at some of the statistics, then it is CO2, carbon dioxide emitted per passenger per kilometer versus mode, and we can see that this is much on the higher side for airplane, two-wheeler, bus, average car, in descending order, and then small car and the train. So definitely we have train or rail as the most effective mode to minimize the negative impact on the environment and reduce the carbon emission. There are various measures in public and private domain necessary even to minimize the overall impact of transport on the environment. We can also look at some more interesting statistics. At one side, the need for transport is growing because there is a growth in the population in India. And we can also see that total number of registered motor vehicles has drastically increased from 51 to 2015. It witnesses the growth of transport sector at one side, but also various other negative impacts in terms of managing the traffic, in terms of minimizing the carbon emission, and in terms of achieving the efficiency are of prime focus. Registered vehicles per 100 kilometer of road, even we can see that this 2001 to 2015, this has also increased in India. So transport demand management, when we see, then in India, it is almost the doubling rate of cars in India in nearly 8 to 10 years, and witnessed 1.2 lakh deaths per year due to traffic fatalities. So one side, when we say that transport sector is growing, the automobile industries, they are doing well. On the other side, we have our sustainability concerns. Environmental sustainability of Indian cities is a major imperative, and we will try to look into more details, statistics, that what is the present status. Our legacy transportation system and technologies are facing huge constraints and are overburdened. We have to simultaneously create the infrastructure. We have to make the government policies and laws by which the equitable use of public and private transportation can be ensured. So creating new and environmentally friendly transportation system for urban transit is the need of the hour. If you look at the modal share comparison in different cities, then in Delhi, Mumbai and Bengaluru, it goes like this. Delhi, 42% is the public transport. The same in case of Mumbai is marginally high, which is 45%, and Bengaluru, it is 35%. If we look at the percentage of walk, then it is 21% in Delhi, 27% in Mumbai, and 26% in Bengaluru. So we can see through this distribution that what is the need of redistributing the modes of transport, providing better public transport, achieving the greater quality of transport, and motivating the people to move for or to adapt for the appropriate need of transport rather than owning the private car and adding to traffic, adding to congestion and the environmental pollution. Similarly, we can see some of the countries and how the distribution is. So London, rail is almost 12%, but if you look at the Seoul, it is 28%, Shanghai, it is 20%. And walk in London, it is 30%, wherein it is almost say 27% in Shanghai and so on. So we can appreciate that yes, the other countries, they do have the different combination of usage of transport, but in India or the other country, we all are trying to achieve or move towards more sustainable mode of transport. If we begin with the first dimension of our IRS, that is inclusive, resilient, and sustainable transport, then inclusive transport is transport for all. So here, what is my ability to safely and reliably access a preferred destination by navigating an environment considerate of individual needs? Can I accommodate the blind people? Can I accommodate maybe the poor people, economically backward people? Do I have the transport for all modes desired by the citizens? So here it is quite a bigger and challenging issue. How can I create an infrastructure where I have a space for disabled, I have a space for economically backward class, I have a space for pedestrian, I have a space for two-wheeler, four-wheeler, and so on. So better mobility for people with disabilities starts with the awareness and commitment of everyone engaged in transport, from policymaker to bus driver, to make changes. If we refer the statistics indicated by WHO, then it estimates that 15% of world's population lives with some form of disability, and 80% of these people live in low-income countries. So they all need transport to sustain their life. And do we have a transport at present which can accommodate their need? There are certain steps we may refer to make transport inclusive, easy and intuitive use without causing confusion or anxiety for user. Laws and regulations to make vehicles and systems accessible to people with disabilities are not adequate to ensure their mobility. This is some area where significant work is required. Mobility must be tackled at the most basic level by providing appropriate access for wheelchairs and other mobility devices. We must have an enabling transport where people really feel safe, confident, and motivated with all their disabilities or the shortcomings. Designing and constructing streets, sidewalks to ensure that people with disability can move about safety. Many cities, this is a big problem. There is not a proper walkway, maybe a space for pedestrians, cyclists, and many a times it results into accidents and fatalities. Minimum physical effort to use for everyone, including children, older people, and people with disabilities. So transport for all, sufficient space for passengers, including wheelchair users and people traveling with small children, baggage, pregnant women, and so on. There are few principles of inclusive transport. Transport system that works for poor and vulnerable, I will consider that as an inclusive transport. Moving people, not the vehicles. This is a philosophy behind inclusive transport. We want to provide a safe, reliable, and economically affordable mobility to people. It is not about congesting the areas with the vehicles. Clean air, clean vehicles, clean streets, and clean facilities. Maybe the goals, objectives at this stage seems little bit ambiguous, but there is a strong need to develop a policy framework, government regulations and restrictions to see that we really have a good mobility with good quality of life. Mobility with safety and civility, planning workable, bikeable cities, and mobility of all, by all and for all. So I would like to reflect on some of the dimensions that fosters inclusive transport. Number one, as the booking stage. Let us try to see that when passenger enters into the system, how can I ensure the presence of some of the important attributes of inclusive transport. So at the booking stage, this stage presents a number of potential pain points for vulnerable groups. For example, if you look at a person with wheelchair, he does not know if a train station is equipped with elevators, and if there are design barriers that may make it difficult to board and alight from a train. Many places in cities, they have tried to create a more accessible and safe experience for senior travelers, but still these initiatives are quite in the infant stage. Planners should create pooling options so that women and members of other vulnerable groups could choose to commute in groups. And they may also provide a direct line of communication between traveler and the service provider for better dissemination of information and coordination on security measures, optimal travel times, and easy access facilities. If we move to next step, that is pre-departure phase. Many times we observe that there is significant need, maybe in terms of behavior of the people or reshaping it, and also ensuring the safe and secure, say, means of transport or boarding to the passengers. So planners can integrate important safety and pooling information into the departure reminder, noting the location of accessible facilities, maybe medical facility, or maybe the sitting space, and safe train, cars, carriage with an attendant, conductor, or security officer. Visual nudges and cues could promote positive behavior. For example, it can offer assistance to people with mobility constraint or to pregnant women. We can offer more rooms for nursing mothers and a greater number of dedicated waiting areas to facilitate their pre-departure convenience. Planners can target both safety and comfort in its train platforms and stations, and key stops can be upgraded to become more accessible and livable. The third phase, where we need to examine the inclusiveness of the transportation and ensure the necessary measures, is traveling and arriving at destination. You have started the journey and now you are arriving at the destination. So pregnant women or passengers with specific physical needs could wear "May I sit" pins to alert other commuters to give way to them. It is more about creating a positive behavior in the society. Special provisions should be made to make journeys comfortable and affordable for persons with disabilities. They should not feel like an avoided class, neglected class of the society. They have equal right. Standards must be set for the design and operation of accessible vehicles. There is a lot of need to design our buses, trains with ergonomic principles, including the needs of, special needs of the disabled people. If I put the various measures that can really help us to move ahead in our journey of inclusive transport, then there are universal measures, there are regional measures, and there are supplementary measures. When we say universal measures, it is more about adding elevators to stations, introducing low-floor buses, sound devices at traffic lights, curb cuts at pedestrian crossing, and spoken announcement at public transport stops. These are universal measures, and once they are ensured, they will cater the need of many with certain physical or mental disabilities. Regional measures, paved roads to all built-up areas. This is something which is very much lacking in many cities. Extension of bicycle services to non-served areas. Provision of on-demand public transport services. Many a times their frequency, their schedule demotivates the people from using the public transport. Improving public transport service on poorly served routes. The supplementary measures could be subsidized wheelchair, subsidized walking aid, subsidized mobility scooter, travel companion for passenger with travel impairment, dedicated parking services for people with the travel impairment. So there are many reforms needed to accommodate the need of all. And this is something where we are more concerned about policy measures, regulatory measures to improve upon our inclusivity in the transport. So if we just see some of the adoptions, maybe motivating examples, then bus rapid transport operational in various cities, as we know, has made some of the motivating, encouraging modifications, adoptions in transportation. Well-lit streets and bus shelters, folding ramp inside each bus to allow access to wheelchair users on regular roads, space to park wheelchairs with provision of safety belt to secure during journey inside the buses. Even there is a provision of braille signage and audible message at 1.5 to 1.6 meter above ground level on signage panels. Bus shelters with barrier-free access, defined boarding gates with warning tiles and audible signals that beep when light is green. So this physical, audio, visual infrastructure, it really makes the journey comfortable and adds towards our inclusive transportation. We can see a few more examples. Delhi Metro Rail Corporation has set an example of being the most accessible public transport system in India. Buses, they comprise of wide doors, transit ramps, designated wheelchair space, public information system with audio and digital display, color contrast, handrails and stations, and illuminated destination and route signs. So this really makes the people comfortable, and not only comfortable, the journey in public transport more and enjoyable. The entire route of 620 low floor buses in a part of New Delhi, including terminals and stop, is universally accessible. Bus queue shelters have been developed for convenience of the passengers, and curb ramps and tactile tiles, including braille information signature, provided at these points. Even I am extremely happy to share the initiatives of Indian Railways. So Ministry of Railways and RDSO is working on accessible railway coaches with toilets and transit boarding devices. All trains, they have one compartment for disabled with accessible toilets and seat area to assist passenger with mobility aids and facilitate their journey. Coming to the second part of our session, that is resilient transport. So inclusive transport, when it emphasizes on meeting the need for all, resilient transport emphasizes on ability of my transport to bounce back under the case of any disruption. So COVID-19 is the classic case. We all are overcoming from this COVID-19 negative impact. Our economy once again has started growing, and people are also now able to move freely, but just see how it has impacted the transport system. And this is where it has really created the scope and provision for improving the resiliency of the transport system. So when we talk about resilience, typically it is understood as the capacity of a transport system to resist and absorb the impacts of the disturbance caused by a shock, interruption, or disaster in order to maintain the acceptable level of service. And this is typically called one of the dimensions of resilient transport, that is robustness. The second dimension is the bounce back ability, which refers to recover and bounce back to the pre-shock steady state of regular and balanced functioning. Transport system has failed, but can it bounce back with whatever alternatives, different routes, shifting to different modes, and recover from the negative impact? And the third is the adaptability, transport to a different stage of operation. So these three dimensions basically constitutes the resilient transport, and this has really become a need when a lot of disturbances in terms of floods, natural disasters, pandemics, war, and many other disturbances takes place, and you have to support the livelihood of the people. You have to ensure the mobility, and you also have to support the supply chains of the industry. So in nutshell, it is the capability of transport system to recover from the disruption to an operational level similar to prior to the disruption in a timely manner. Longer and deeper the impact of disruption on operation, the less resilient transportation system is. Higher the time I take to set it back, even if there is an accident and the mobility got disrupted or some routes are congested, how fast I can put my transport system back decides its capability to offer resilience. So many times it may take several weeks, and depending on the damage and availability of labor and equipment, the resiliency level of the system can be decided. So this is something where we can appreciate that the disruption has occurred at some point in time, and because of this negative impact, my operations got disturbed, it went to negative, and then the moment I recover from my negative impact and put my transport system back to normal, the time elapsed between these two decides my resilience level. We can even look at the forms of resilience. A simple example, if I look at the efficient supply chain, and if I look at the resilient supply chain, the difference lies in my ability to feed the various nodes, even if there is a disturbance at a particular node. So efficient supply chain is more concerned about achieving the cost efficiency, but resilient supply chain, when it has definitely a consideration for efficiency, it also considers the alternative routes and the possibility to bounce back as early as possible, and hence the disruption at any node may not collapse the entire system for a long period. If we look at the overall vision, then we wish to lay out a future mobility system that provides safe, equitable, inclusive accessibility, which can look like the picture you can see on the screen, providing sustainable, integrated, flexible, and robust mobility options, and identifying key priorities for cities transport system to deliver during normal times and times of crisis both. There are various stages, and we can go a little deeper into resilience transport. If I look at the individual, then it is how an individual is able to get around if the person's vehicle breaks down. At personal level, suppose there is an injury, person becomes disabled or suffers some loss of income. So either a disability or maybe he moves to the lower income class or whatever, then how my transportation system can accommodate this. Community. Traffic can continue to move despite accidents, emergencies, seasonal construction projects, or special events. Many times we have seen that when the metro projects, they are under construction, if the proper planning is not done, then it causes a lot of disturbance to the day-to-day mobility of the people. Similarly, many bridges, overbridges, and constructions, they take place in the city. And do we have a mechanism by which I can provide reasonably good quality transport to my community? The design stage, system has specific built-in features to deal with extreme levels of demand and critical and unexpected problems. So at the design stage of the transportation, how can I ensure that under a case of disruption, can I move to the different mode of transport or get adapted to different routes, and without having much disturbance, a longer period of recovery, I can set the system back. Similarly, economics. This enables personal transport to continue functioning even if an important resource such as oil, gasoline, we all are concerned about petroleum resources, becomes unavailable or prohibitively expensive. And at the strategy level, we need to create a system to accommodate future growth and possible changes to future usage or access patterns. Because traffic is growing, the need of transport to support industry, we can look at the e-commerce business and the kind of impact it created on transportation, timely delivery. All this demands some strategic level reforms by which the adequate infrastructure can be created timely. So resilience metrics, we can just look into robustness. When I say hours of congestion, spatial extent of congestion, what is the area and how much congestion takes place, travel time index, optimal spare capacity, payment condition, and so on. Redundancy may be corridor with alternate routes and availability, distance to alternate routes, available capacity congestion and alternate routes and transit alternatives. Resourcefulness, safety service patrol, average incident duration, at what frequency accidents are taking place, or maybe the damages to infrastructures are taking place which restricts my transport, funding availability, construction projects, and so on. Rapidity, it is time until reopened or fully restored for top 5% incident, and average construction project duration. So I can ensure the resilience in my cities transport through set of measures broadly divided into robustness, redundancy, resourcefulness, and the rapidity. A framework that helps to achieve the resilience is about defining and constructing transport infrastructure networks. It is more at the planning stage, strategic level, identifying the levels to measure transport infrastructure network resilience. So here we may define the various levels of resilience depending upon the risk associated with the routes and the transport infrastructure. Step 3 would be analyzing the influence factors to transport infrastructure network resilience. So it's a systematic framework which helps us to define the measures, define the factors which has a possible impact on my transport resilience, and what are the influencing factors. Is it the natural disaster? So there are many areas prone to natural disaster. Is it the labor strike? Is it because the accident prone areas, and so on? Step 4, selecting appropriate measuring method for transport infrastructure network resilience. The fourth stage comes once we have the detailed analysis of the network, factors affecting the network, and the factors influencing the resilience of my transport infrastructure. Then it comes to deciding the appropriate method for transport infrastructure network resilience. And finally, as a part of step 5, we can calculate and analyze the resilience of transport infrastructure network. So here we have an opportunity to determine the index, and based on the index, even the funding for infrastructure, the necessary maintenance measures, or the plan for optional routes can be created that will help us to see that gradually we can improve upon the resilience index for various transport networks. So typically my concept of resilience, it is broadly addressing reducing the likelihood of a disaster and increasing the ability of a community to absorb or resist a shock, increasing the ability of a system while maintaining functions in the presence of a shock. Now, if the shock has occurred, any disaster has occurred, under these circumstances, how can I get adapted and bounce back as early as possible, and reducing the time to recovery to normal functioning. So broadly, it is called absorptive capacity, restorative capacity, and adaptive capacity. So absorptive capacity deals with the ability of the transport system to absorb shock when it gets exposed to various risks. And this is something where transport planners frequently invest in activities to increase their absorptive capacities. For example, mileage of transportation assets in high-risk areas for such natural hazards as floods, wildfires, landslides. And this is something where the planners, they have to think about the alternates to improve upon the absorptive capacity of the transport. Restorative capacity, that is my ability of the transport system to recover quickly after a shock or stress to normal functioning. So this can be increased by establishing disaster response plans, quick response capabilities, and having such response plans in place. This can greatly improve the speed and effectiveness of efforts to restore transportation capacity. And the third one is the adaptive capacity. So under the situation of disaster, how my transportation system can get adapted to alternate routes, or there is an availability of the alternate routes or not, that at the initial stage planner has to decide. And the measures of the availability of alternate route choice include the distance to alternate route, the number of reliable routes, and measure of network density. So we have seen the efficient transport vis-a-vis the resilient transport network. And we can see that in the resilient transport network, I have the option to move my freight or the passenger traffic to alternate routes under any situation of crisis or disaster. Coming to the last portion of our session and the third dimension of our IRS, that is the sustainable transport. So here, mode share, usage of various modes of transport and its impact on the environment is of utmost importance. People need mobility, people need connect, but simultaneously, people also need a good quality of life. So there is a trade-off. And this trade-off can very well be achieved with variety of options, modes of transport available. There is only a need to unify, integrate, and achieve the synergy across various modes of transport. So it's a very good remark on sustainability, that we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. We cannot utilize the resources, let it be water, air, infrastructure, whatever, just keeping our life a very small part in mind. We must understand that there is going to be a life on this planet, and people, children, all age, say mankind, they would need a better quality of life. So sustainability is about possibility that human and other forms of life on earth will flourish forever. If we see the next generation living with a lot of disabilities, diseases, psychological problems, very poor quality life, then I think we have not really ensured a good economic growth. Any economic growth at the cost of human life and the future generation is never appreciated. Sustainable development is all about meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising with the ability and the need of the future generation. On the contrary, we should create a sustainable structure, and transport is the key determinant to see that we enhance the quality of life of the next generation. So with this note, let us try to look into what is sustainability in transport. It refers to environmental sustainability, air pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, optimum use of natural resources, financial sustainability. So it is typically called TBL sustainability, triple bottom line, environmental, economical, and social. I have to ensure the sustainability on all three grounds. So sustainable transport typically aims to minimize energy, land, and resource consumption, or rather I would say efficient use of these three, possesses least damage to environment, does not impair mobility, needs of the future generation, optimizes transport needs of the passenger and goods, and repeatedly we are discussing and mentioning that it encourages modal shift and interconnection of roadways, airways, railways, and waterways, minimizes greenhouse gas emission and ozone depleting substance. So we have the need for sustainable transport because there is a growing energy consumption, greenhouse effect, health and social impact, non-inclusive development, and the road safety is of utmost importance. We can just refer some of the statistics to support our views. Carbon dioxide emission from fuel combustion, metric ton CO2 per year. If you see 1990 to 2080, it has rapidly increased. Now, if you look at the role of transport and role of industries, definitely industrialization contributes significantly to CO2 emission, and it is 34%, but next to it is transport, which is 13%. So there is a significant scope to reduce carbon emission. And I will dwell on some of the issues, alternatives, how we can help our environment to have clean air, sustainability, and a sustainable transport. We can see the various cities in India and what is the energy consumption for urban commuting in the 14 cities. So Delhi, it goes very high, Chennai, Bangalore, and then Bhopal. So we can understand that what is the carbon emission associated. When we wish to move towards sustainable transport and specifically address the issue of carbon emission, there are three domains broadly we should look into. One is the infrastructure. So now we have the options to include decarbonization of terminals and corridors. Transportation modes can be ranked by their carbon intensity. Even there are many regulations internationally adopted in terms of carbon tax, less carbon intensive construction methods and strategies. The second domain which can help us to improve upon our sustainability is convenience and equipment. So focus is on fuel and sources of energy. Rail and road electrification is the key strategy. Extremely happy to say that Indian Railways has achieved remarkable electrification of rail lines across India. Urban mobility should have larger share of pedestrians and bicycles. Many people, they are interested to walk. They want to go by bicycle, but we do not have an infrastructure to cater their needs. So when a person is faced with safety concern, definitely he would prefer four-wheeler when actually he is not desirous of. Management and operations focusing on pricing strategies and competitiveness of transportation modes. How can I motivate my people? People, they desire the transportation. I cannot force the transportation. People, they are desiring the various modes of transport, and this desire can be captured through appropriate pricing strategies. And we can encourage better utilization of the transport assets. If you look at quickly the carbon dioxide emission by passenger and freight transport modes, then it is in terms of grams of CO2 per passenger kilometer. So we have passenger segment, large cars, aviation, average cars, buses, and rail in descending order. And in case of freight, we have aviation, medium trucks, heavy trucks, rail has significant role to play, and maritime. So various benefits we have discussed, that sustainable transport can reduce this greenhouse emission, better quality of life, vibrant economy, make a preferred place for living and reduces air pollution and so on. So there is a comprehensive mobility plan proposed by MOHUA India, and this mobility plan focuses on long-range transportation package designed to improve the city environment, land use, and economic development. Strives to improve connectivity and travel throughout city and its region. So the measures are taken. There is a positive, say, movement towards achieving the sustainability in India to make viable, reliable transport options, and CMP will ultimately, this comprehensive mobility plan, lead to environmentally sustainable transport system. So Ministry of Urban Development, Government of India, they have launched National Urban Transport Policy, and time to time, the policy revisions are adopted. So policy objectives, it includes to ensure safe, affordable, and quick, comfortable, reliable access for the growing number of cities. Recognize that people are development partners in our cities. It is very important objective. Mobility is not an individual need. When they travel, they do the economic activity. And this economic activity has direct implication for regional as well as national development. So they are partners, and their appropriate need of transport mobility needs to be satisfied. Focusing on people mobility and not vehicle mobility, as I mentioned previously. So there are various policy measures. Notification of vehicular emission norms were upgraded from time to time. Improving fuel quality by phasing out lead from petrol, reducing diesel sulfur, reducing gasoline benzene, introduction of alternative fuel vehicles, improvement of public transport system, use of CNG, and so on. Safety concerns of cyclists and pedestrians are addressed in many cities as a part of smart city project, but still in many cities, we can see that the infrastructure is not that adequate. Priority for the construction of cycle tracks, pedestrian paths in all cities, and formulation and implementation of specific area plans in congested urban areas, and encouragement of the battery-driven electric vehicles. So this is where we can see that the trend of my vehicles sold transport sector lies two-wheeler, three-wheeler, we can see four-wheelers and the buses. So annual electric vehicle sales in India, obviously the four-wheelers now gradually the companies, Tata and others, they are launching. So still it is not in place, but two-wheelers very much it is growing, and three-wheelers also, there is a good positive sign of sales, which really is a motivating factor. So National Auto Fuel Policy was enacted to set out roadmap for the next decade on the quality of fuels and standard of vehicles. 11 most polluted cities, including Ahmedabad, Hyderabad, Surat, Pune, Agra, and others, will have stricter pollution control norms complying with the international standards. There are various measures taken as a part of promotion and dissemination, encourage individuals, families, and communities to adopt green travel habits using public transport, campaigns for public support for initiatives like greater use of public transport, and so on. I would like to put the sustainable transport initiatives in a framework of four-pronged strategy. At one side, we are looking for the clean fuels, electric vehicles. Yes, there are certain issues, charging stations, time it takes to charge the battery, roughly about 8 hours. If you go to the petrol pump, it may take only 2 to 3 minutes to fill your tank. Hydrogen fuel, huge cost is involved. Hydrogen is quite a sensitive gas. Storage is a big issue, and also its say low its emissivity and the ignition point is again the concern, where hydrogen fuel is showing some restrictions, and biofuel, there is always a trade-off. The land I would utilize for agriculture, producing the food for the people, and the land I will utilize for producing the vegetables or the seeds necessary for biofuel, and also the availability of gasoline. Many a times when biofuel in usage reduces the carbon emission, but during the production, it has a lot of carbon emission, and that trade-off also need to be set. On the other side, modal shift is the another option. Increasing the share of cleaner modes, rail, waterways, shipping, walking, cycling. So even Indian Railways is working. Usually they are more in bulk transport, but even with the RFID and other technology, they are trying to handle even the smaller consignment, and they set an exemplary, say, case during the COVID by supporting Flipkart, Amazon, and many others. The other option we have is to optimize. An empty seat in a moving vehicle is a wasted resource. Many times we have seen that when we travel in a bus or when we travel in a train, the entire compartment occupies only 20% passengers. This is because of lack of, say, connectivity across various modes of transport, and also incentivizing, motivating the people, and dynamic pricing, which are the full capacity utilization of the transport vehicles. Interconnected modes, not standalone. So this is something where we do have an option to decide the frequency, route length, and the connectivity for the people. So in summary, my sustainable transportation or sustainable development is through three areas. One is the mode, another is the infrastructure, and the logistics. When I say mode, infrastructure, and logistics, they all can be integrated in terms of environment, whether it is a climate change, air quality, noise, land use, or it is economy, my GDP, fair pricing, job prosperity, employment generation, and society. It is all about improving the quality of life of the people, safety, health, disturbances, access, and the equity transport for all. So as a consolidated framework, we can say that I want at one side sustainable production, because industry is producing 34% carbon emission. On the other side, I want sustainable products. So I can do remanufacturing, I can reuse it, I can have the extended product life cycle. So the value addition, enhance the usage of various resources which are emitting carbon, can also be controlled. And sustainable transport, that is the green logistics. So I really need to work on all the three areas: sustainable production, sustainable products, and the sustainable transport. And as a combination of these, I can really achieve, or we as a country can really impact our initiative towards sustainable development. I will just quickly go through the Government of India policy measures on sustainability. So from 1981 onwards, the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act was introduced. Then Environmental Protection Act 1986. So this is in fact under implementation. Then Motor Vehicle Act, Integrated Transport Policy, National Auto Fuel Policy, various ministries, they have taken the initiatives. Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, National Urban Transport Policy, National Action Plan on Climate Change, National Road Safety Policy, National Electric Mobility Policy came in 2013. Then faster adoption and manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicles, smart city missions. So as we understand that to cover the entire nation or the major cities, it takes more than 15, 20, 30 years. And hence, government has taken the initiatives, but the plans are under execution, the implementation is going on. And at strategic level, ministry levels, there are significant initiatives to see that we as a country can really ensure the sustainable development through sustainable transport. So there are various initiatives. As a conclusion, I want to offer some of the challenges in terms of expected contributions from academics and industry. We expect industry to contribute and government towards IRS transportation by offering the efficient and user-friendly IT platforms with AI and ML competencies. We have seen Ola, Uber, and many other. They have really revolutionized the way we were visualizing or conceiving the mobility, enhancing cloud computing capabilities for transportation. Even Ministry of Electronics and Commerce, they have launched a cloud called Meghraj, and there are a lot of initiatives taking place even to improve upon our cloud computing capabilities, which is quite cost effective and also can be easily adapted by small scale industries. Technological advancements for electric vehicles, hydrogen fuel, biofuel. We need competitive logistics services like 3PL, 4PL, freight forwarding. In fact, we have leads indicator, and this leads indicator measures our logistics infrastructure and capabilities across various states and motivates the states to take certain measures or adopt the benchmark measures and improve upon their logistics competitiveness. So here, the role of 3PL, 4PL, freight forwarding comes into play. Similar way, unification of various ministries. Today in India, we are taking various initiatives, but still, unless we have the unification of various ministries, maybe under Ministry of Transport, it is difficult really to visualize or realize our dream of sustainable and integrated transport. So government is also moving in this direction. And in fact, as a part of that, this university, National Rail and Transport University, is established. Client-centric approach with multimodal transportation, cost efficiency and responsiveness, and the policy formulation for an integrated transport and improving logistic competitiveness. Academicians, researchers, they do have a critical role to play. For example, optimization models and heuristics in transport for scheduling, maintenance, and routing. There is a significant need to work in this area. Empirical research to investigate various linkages among key attributes of various modes of transport, development and testing of various policies. So here there is a need to conduct simulation and evaluate various scenarios. So there is a dire need for industry to contribute towards sustainable transportation. There is a challenge for academicians to look into various areas, model building, testing, validating scenarios, or optimizing the various dimensions of transports, attributes of transports, maintenance and scheduling, and contributes towards IRS, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable transportation. So with this, I thank you all for your patience and interest in this session, and I hope the ideas covered in this session will definitely help policymakers, industry, and researcher to take one step forward. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we can end the session here. NPTEL, can you hear me? NPTEL.
Hello, sir. Hello,
So
sir.
I think we can stop the session here. There is as such no query.
Yes, sir. I cannot. Yes, sir. Tell me.
I think we can stop the session here.
Okay, okay, fine, sir. Fine.